I'm going to ask a question, and could be a difficult one. I don't know. I think we're trying to get beyond some of the stumbling blocks here. Yeah? So we've heard about the word smart. It's got a slightly loaded connotation. It can mean a certain university you go to. That's not inclusive. I certainly think in Europe too and other places, some people are uncomfortable with that word. Let's get past that word. Okay? It's not about technology per se. That's not what this is about. So I think I'll ask one question and I'll invite it to anyone because it's a bit of a difficult one. But if we were to go beyond those two things, it's not smart, it's not just technology. The vision of the smart nation. What do you think it is? What's underlying? What can we articulate? If we can get those stumbling blocks out of the way, we've heard a big, bold vision. When we hear it, we say, yes, we think there's something that we can identify in there. And I can spot things in there that I really powerfully identify. If we strip those stumbling blocks away, what is it that's enticing us? What is it about that vision? Would anyone like to have a go at that?
I'll try. I mean, I'll tell you what came to mind, and it's really the concept of flourishing. That a smart nation is a means to allow us to live lives that are better than the ones we have now. Right? And it's about flourishing, I think. It's about all of us being able to reach a point where we are living out the best possible lives we have in the best possible ways. Right? And the technology then becomes an enabler to help us be most fully and dynamically and vibrantly human. Yeah, that would be my quick response to that. Yeah. I think it's about, if in one word, it would be a flourishing process.
Dynamically and vibrantly human, that's beautiful.
My immediate response that came up when I asked the question was, so my line of work gives me the privilege of actually working with public people and private sectors, right? And in doing so over here, if there's one commonality between all the people that somehow work or strive to do better, it's just that a lot of work is centered around us not being able to read each other's minds. I mean, there's some minds you don't want to read, but you know, you know what I mean. And there's so much inefficiency, right, built into that particular function. The whole Tower of Babel thing was freaking genius from God, right? Just split all the language and nations and things like that. And I get it that if we are moving towards a technological removal of barrier, then I would look at a more trusting city.
Yeah.
Yeah, a city itself that's able to trust better, including the ping pong game, right? Yeah. That the person standing across that pedestrian crossing, someone I may not necessarily trust, right? But ping pong allows me to facilitate a lot of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my first reaction was, or the first kind of thing that came out to me was really this, the word was courage for me. I think that when it comes down to it, and the quote that is kind of going in my head right now is I think it's Roosevelt, basically the man in the arena. Is that Roosevelt?
Yeah.
Yeah, but basically he's got this, it's not the critic that matters, right? It's not the one who tells the strong man how he stumbles. But at the end of the day, it's the man in the arena. You know, and I think that for me, this idea of smart nation, and it comes down to, you know, again, permission, getting new stories in, right? It's about being in the arena. You know, it's about, and what I see from the technology side, I know it was a taboo word, I wasn't supposed to say it, but what I see from the technology side and what excites me about the technology is that it democratizes, you know, kind of the ability to get involved. Mm-hmm. You know, something that used to be, wow, this techno-elite kind of vision. Actually, with, you know, a lot of the technologies, they do have the potential of being inclusive, community-driven, you know, participatory and stuff like that. And that for me is, you know, it's about being in the arena. Yeah.
Thank you. So 3 very powerful answers we've got in one word, which is always nice and neat. So trust, courage, and flourishing. My next question, I need to frame quite carefully, and it's to do with how this can become a bigger project than only a government project. And really that's what we've all been speaking to. And I've spoken to a lot of people while I've been here. Many of you are in the audience, and anything intelligent I say, it's thanks to someone out here. You know, I'm aware of some of the dimensions to this. You know, the government's very effective. There's structural pressures. For example, there's lots of very well-paid jobs in banking. Why would you want to become a social activist? you know? Lots of social pressures from parents, etc. And some of our innovation lab projects, which you'll see presented, actually take some of those challenges on. So what prospect do we see? Maybe let's kind of bring this down to earth a little bit. So not in the far future. Let's be realistic. Tangibly, how could something like this shift to being, you know, something that people do own, that's something that people take for themselves and actually feel they can maybe take? I know we've already heard some deep thought around how people can take those personal steps, but are there any other considerations? What can we, what can you, what can they do?
I mean, I guess for me, the first thing is, and this goes back to what Aaron was saying about not thinking about life as discrete events, but really as a campaign, right? I'm sure a lot of you, like myself, attend a bajillion conferences, you know, and after a while, you can start to think of them as discrete events, right? You know, I came to this thing, it started at 10, and we'll leave at 6, and then, you know, a bunch of people went on, and then we went home. You know, which, yeah, well, but I mean, if you thought about it as a campaign, you know, I think the mindset would be really different, right? Because you then think of it as you've got this conference, you've got this whole bunch of people who were so interested in the idea of a smart nation, future, you know, future everything, who you know, are interested about the issues that go on, enough to spend the whole day here, you know, and these are potential collaborators, these are potential, you know, people you could work with, you know, do projects with. I met Tongi at a conference, actually, at the TEDx Singapore. You know, and I mean, if I knew then, you know, the shenanigans and the bizarre projects that we would end up getting involved in together over, you know, maybe the last, 5, 7 years? I mean, you know, that again, you know, you see it as a campaign, right? And then it's got so much beautiful forward momentum to it, so much possibility. So that for me, I think is really what I hope to see. So, you know, go and shake hands with somebody you don't know at the tea break. I mean, it comes down to something like that, right? And take a risk, right? And see who you never know. Right?
I'd also say I think it's important not to worry too much about the labels of who does what. You know, I know we heard a lot about what government's role is in this and what business's role and what civil society and activist role is. And I think that's important, but if you also push a little bit further, you realize that each of those categories is a construct, right? We created them because they help us administratively to understand who does what, right? Who puts the traffic light in a particular spot and then who drives the car and things like that. But actually all of those sectors need each other. Right? Governments have the ability to achieve great scale and institutional longevity, but they can also be very slow. In fact, on a lot of things, they should be slow because they're spending public money. But that slowness gets compensated for by the alacrity and agility of the private sector and the creativity and innovation. But businesses, at their point of dysfunction, can become avaricious and greedy and you know, almost purely profit-driven. And that gets compensated for by the passion and idealism and kindness and compassion of the people sector. But at their worst, they can also be a bit self-righteous sometimes, you know, and just be extremely mono-dimensional in their causes. And that then gets compensated for by the strength and institutional longevity that governments can have. So I often like to think that all sectors and all of these mental constructs have both a very, very high purpose and a dark side. And the trick for the smart nation would be, first of all, let's try and avoid the dark sides as much as we can, and help each other, compensate for them where possible. And we will need a few of us, I think, who are willing to just go beyond the labels and say, you know what? I don't need the label. I can be civil servant Monday to Friday, and then on evenings I will be social activist, and on Saturday I will teach, and on Sunday I'll be a tech entrepreneur. And that's fine, right? We don't need the labels that much. And the more we can fight those things, I think, the more I think we will realize that we do have parts to play, right? That's part of the giving ourselves permission, I think, right? And harnessing the ability that every one of us has to make some sort of contribution. But I think defying the labels is a key part of it.
Yeah.
A very quick response. The image that's popping through my mind right now is a lot of our work that we do in Singapore society is very much responsive. We are really alert. We watch what's going on, and when there's a gap, we as much as possible jump in to fill it. One powerful metaphor for that would be, like when a tennis game is going on, and then the ball pickers on the side, he is fully participative in that particular game. He's watching the game. Actually, he's probably more alert than the other two players. Right. Yeah, I mean, the ball drops, boom, in, out, and it facilitates the rest of the game. And I think that really is where the role of civil society is. I don't think we're any lesser. But it is a valuable space that we fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I'll give a very quick response, and then I'll invite some questions from the floor. And just simply to say, to pick up on those points, in some senses, it's an assumption that a precondition for this vision of the smart nation is a more active civil society, also small businesses.
Yes.
And that's, I think, a key metaphor. But also, there's some assumptions and some very simplistic dimensions to that. This vision that a simply more participatory society is more just, is more equal, because there's divisions through that society that you have to overcome. And actually, often capitalism recycles these things very, very fast, and the kind of emancipatory dimension can be illusory. Yeah. So I think that there's a very rich discussion around there. I've seen one question here. We've got only a few minutes, so I could take two at once. I'll take this one first, and we'll see how we get on. So, please.
Hi, thank you for the three presentations. I mean, there are two words that really come back resoundingly, and there is one kind of a repeat from the last question, which came from the back. One is trust, and the other thing is permission. When the three presentations, there were two of your government officials, and Tong Yi, when you were talking about...
we lost Cheryl, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. And Tong Yi, when you talked about the smart nation, in the end you said, it's here to stay, and I don't have a choice, so I'm just going to embrace it and go ahead and do it. And that's kind of a trust that you have for the government. And do we think at this point in time, it's this generation of yours that you're in, where there is this trust for the government that you work with, but it might not be the same when the next generations who are questioning quite a few things will be coming back and talking about it? So that's one question that I have.
A very quick response is, I have the privilege of working a lot with the younger generation, and it feels as if the propaganda has been pretty well drilled.
You're not going to be on the slides next.
Oops. But there's a very much younger generation that truly believes in what we've created. They travel, they are they have well access to all other kinds of societies, and I think they have enough of a head on their shoulders to be able to do some pretty objective comparison. If you do hear cynical things online, I do think that they're the exception. I used to think that they were the rule, but they're not. I'm meeting tons of young people who truly believe and they're committed to actually contribute to the nation. Yeah, they truly think it's a miracle. I mean, I think it's a miracle.
Does anyone want to come back on that, or shall I pull in another question?
Yeah. Do you think just hear them and just like,
okay. I shall demoderate myself.
I hope you can remember what these questions are.
We'll make it up.
Can we have audio?
Thank you for the commentary for the session and the earlier sessions. There's one adjective that still hasn't really come out, and I'm going to say it. Smart nation is a bit too biased, skewed towards tech. That's got to change. I'm not saying we can't do it, all that you've said. You have to do it because that is the convergence. And that's the information pathway that's essential for qualitative decisions. We need to be a smart, caring nation.
Yeah, absolutely.
One, because as neighbors within Singapore, we need to respect each other. We do culturally, religious-wise and all that, but there's still too many veins of discrimination, antagonism. I was crossing a road. There was a tie-back of 20 cars. I crossed at the junction. I got honked by a cab, and he wound the screen down and basically said the F word. He would have gained 2 car lengths, that's all. That's got to change. The second, and Alex mentioned it in the earlier session, we're an island. Aaron, a little dot. Until we become a caring nation to ourselves and to our neighbors, forget smart nation. It ain't going to work. They'll haze you out. They'll try and cut your water, but we're reasonably self-sufficient there. But the food chain is next. We need to basically go beyond that into a smart, caring nation for Singaporeans and for our neighbors. Immediately the ASEAN neighbors, because they're our best source for food, agriculture, seafood, etc., etc.
Absolutely.
So those are the thoughts from the public, citizens like myself, that we'd like to see for our future generations, for my children and for my grandchildren. So if that somehow can be woven into your commentary, I'll be truly delighted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was a really useful contribution. Do we have any more points? And then there's one here, and we can take both of these. And I see one at the back.
Hi, thank you for your thoughts. Well, as a citizen, the question is then what the moderator is trying to go towards is beyond tech. What can the smart nation be beyond tech, right? So what are some of the actually alternative pathways that the civil sector, the civil service can actually bring the people to be involved in this smart nation? Because a story that was told to me by a 45-year-old father of 5 actually said, one day I woke up and then I realized that I was like left behind in this smart nation because I was trying so hard to catch up. And then perhaps speaking for people who are outside of this conference then, what better ways can the message be, leaked out onto, the civil society? Yeah.
Thank you. We'll take another question and we'll take both of those at the same time.
So my question is about where does this innovation happen? The thing about Singapore is we don't, for example, have a inventors conference or show like Google does, because we're living at this age of the democratization of invention. So we don't have, right now young kids can invent stuff that can save the world. And we can start up a conventional exhibition for that, but do we have a culture? Do we encourage our children to think, I can change the world? I have the power to have some response and some effect on the world. I don't know whether we have that, because we do have the hardware. Organizing a show, inventor show is the hardware, but the software is this culture. Now, that's not to say I'm here complaining. I also don't want to be that type. I'm here to create my own world. I'm a Singaporean, I live here. So I'm trying to install a 20-foot container in my mom's house to grow 2,400 heads of lettuce a month. If I had to go and ask for permission from all the various ministries, the answer would be no. So there's a culture of permission in me having to do that. So I'm taking a leaf out from Tong Yi, from marriage. I'm going to ask for forgiveness and not ask for permission. So we just go ahead and do it. Yeah. So then the question is, how can these pockets of innovation from the people be embraced? Because if not, it's always top-down. You need it to be a groundswell from the bottom up. And then how do we create that culture of try amongst the younger generation? Because then that's how you get buy-in. That's how you get participation. That's how you get everyone embracing it.
Okay, thank you. We've got, the mic's got to go all the way over
one
there.
last hand there.
I think there's one at the back, and was there another one, Tony?
No, just the last one.
Okay, so we'll take this question and then one more, but let's come back on these. So there was pathways. Who'd like to take that? Erin, would you like to have a go at that one?
Why don't I share some very quick thoughts on what we've heard, and it'll be very, very quick observations. On pathways, I fully agree, right, that there is an element of skilling that needs to be done. And that's actually one of the key motivators behind this recent effort that we call Skills Future, that the government is leading, but that involves businesses, that involves different organizations, really figuring out how we have a group of Singaporeans who are not just able to learn new things, but constantly able to unlearn, relearn, and reinvent themselves. But I do think this is only part of that process. If you look at how the Skills Future effort is being shaped, right, it's not just government working on it, it's about other people coming on board, it's businesses playing their role, about schools and universities also reinventing what the notion of learning is like, and individuals being able to say, we're not just going to view learning stopping after we finish poly or university or ITE, we're going to keep learning, and we have to maybe reinvent ourselves 2 or 3 times over the course of a lifetime. And I think that's the key to it. It's not just the government bringing everybody along, right, to use the phrase that you had, but it's about certain frameworks and infrastructure being set in place within which everybody can be empowered to bring themselves along in this whole process.
Would anyone else like to come back on either of those points? Okay, so we've got one question here. Can I ask, we'll have one other question if there is one. So if you've got one, you've got a minute to think of it. Well, a few seconds. Can we have the question at the back, please?
Hi. So thank you for the panel. It was very insightful. So I guess my question is, given that we're in Singapore, given that we're having this panel discussion, and given that IDA was also involved in organizing this, I'm curious about how, given the mass of information available from the Singapore government, we know that there's a lot of public information available. There's a very strong sense that the Singapore government is so able to provide and cater to almost every need. And I'm curious about what citizens can do in whatever space there is to kind of provide their own information, whether or not the government is interested in information from the government. And when we're considering the idea of the smart nation, this idea of smart nation disturbs me because I guess it imagines a certain idea of what a smart citizen is. And I'm wondering whether it also wants to allow people who are not considered smart, who cannot access technology, who don't know how to use Google Drive, for instance, which is already a very simple kind of crowdsourcing mechanism, right? Is the government interested in looking at these other, also in, I guess, understanding indigenous or local kinds of knowledge? So what spaces are there for this kind of thing to happen? Is the government, is IDA open to something like that? Yeah, I just want to put that on the table. And whether or not, we should be considering things like this.
Okay, thank you. And it looks like that will be our last question. There's a half a hand here. No? There's a full hand over there. So we'll take that one too. Sorry, very, very sorry. Last question over here.
I just wanted to share, and I think that this is a wonderful panel that I've actually set. I've been to a lot of events as well. To come back to the smart nation, I truly believe what it meant is actually citizen-centric. And citizens means it's a whole lifespan from a kid all the way down to end of life at the dwindling years. And that at the end of the day, the devices are just Internet of Things, but I truly believe it's actually fulfilling the intentions, that the things must fulfill the intentions of the citizen, and that's where you get the emotional connection. So to come back to your discussion about what does smart really means, to me, it's about citizens' happiness, and it's about fulfilling their intentions wherever their stages of life, their life stages are, and that we should create this sort of containers, if you like, for different people from different communities to come together to create their own Internet of Things that serve their own purposes. That means you have community leaders in each particular space. They own and they are empowered to design their own smart solutions. And I believe that's the way to go, because you can't have a top-down whereby it's like one size fits all. You probably have that as a framework, which is necessary. But how the individual devices interacts and serve the citizens should be left and be controlled by the communities themselves. Just thought of sharing that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have to have final comments now. So could I ask maybe in reverse order? So Cheryl, would you like to make any final comments?
Yeah, no, I mean, thanks a lot for the comments. And I mean, I think this is some of the more interesting questions that we've had, for today. I mean, to be honest, I'm feeling, at this point, I'm feeling a little bit of, you know, this question that's coming up is, why do we need so much permission? You know, I can't answer that. Maybe it's because you know, and I'm reflecting in my head, is that just because, you know, I've got authority issues and, you know, don't listen in general? I don't know, like, you know, but for me, I'm just thinking, you know, why does it have to be so government-led? You know, 2 weeks ago, I moderated a panel also on kind of smart nation, digital kind of a conversation. And somebody said, you know, basically one of the questions alluded to feeling excluded from this conversation, right? And my response as the moderator was to say, hey, you know, why did you feel that you needed permission? You know, was there something that you could have done, however small that was, that you could have done, you know, with, you know, by yourself, with a community of friends, you know, with your organization, you know, at that kind of scale, and not to think that, wow, tomorrow, you know, like I have to solve all smart nation problems of Singapore, like, you know, kind of, if not, I'm a failure, right? But, you know, just do that, you know, doing that little thing, and you know, my hope and my prayer is really that will snowball into something that's great, you know. I tend to feel like, and my frustration with the Smart Nation vision is, and I share that frustration with a lot of people, that it is a very techno-optimist, technology-centered vision, but at the end of the day, technology is just a tool. You know, it can be for good, it can be for evil. It's just a tool, right? And if it's a tool to gain more empathy, to build community, to be more caring, as the gentleman earlier suggested, you know, I mean, then I think that is a great vision, you know, a great technology-enabled vision to have. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Final words, Tong Yi?
I have the privilege of actually working with civil servants and having them as friends, right?
Not anymore.
Those two things are different, Charlie.
And they are different. As a civil servant, if you really speak to them, they have to communicate the idea that they are in control. When you speak to them as human beings in a hawker center, they have no freaking idea what's going on.
Called your bluff, Aaron.
And they are just as clueless about the future as basically anybody else. And one thing itself, that because of that, that's what makes them collaborative. Because they are not arrogant they really are not arrogant in the facade. They get it. The facade is necessary because it has to give some level of systemic control or some sense of stability. But the bottom line is, if I see someone else who's doing something better than me, I will immediately collaborate. Right? And I think it's a very important part that we have to understand as citizens. I mean, I've been in the social enterprise scene for the past 12 years or so, and I set it up with the imagination that I would do it myself. Right? Somewhere in the 6th or 7th year, finally, I see all these people just all collaborating. Right? What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? How come you can make this happen? And they're all learning, and I think it's one thing that we take for granted is really how curious we are as people. I really don't think we're as stupid as we make ourselves out to be, you know. We really are very curious. Yeah. And we're really committed to excellence. I mean, the results show that. Yeah. Okay, that's all my comments.
Okay, you're back on the slide.
Tenuous
Aaron,
relationship.
final word.
Yes, I loved so many of those comments. Thank you very much for them. I found them very affirming, actually. And I'm going to make one observation, I guess. I'm actually speaking here very much in my personal capacity, you know, not as a rep of the government or MTI, but I'll say something as someone who goes to work and has a .gov.sg email, right? And then two observations as a citizen, because sometimes we forget that we are both those things. And even worse, our friends sometimes forget that we are both those things. But thankfully, this one doesn't forget. So anyway, the comment about that comes from being a practitioner of policy, right, would really be this. There are many ways in which the model and metaphor that we have for governance has evolved over time. Anne-Marie Slaughter, the former dean of the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton, I think put this very best, right? She said, government at one point was control tower. So a bit like your traffic light, right?
Yeah.
The government tells you where to fly, when not to fly, because it has superior information. And that model is in many ways getting more outdated now because technology has democratized information and there are just so many complex problems that government itself has no clue about. And actually, we don't mind saying this a lot. You know, we really don't know, and we have to co-create and co-understand what's going on with citizens and with businesses. Another model of government, as a metaphor, would be the vending machine, right? Citizens pay taxes, therefore they expect when they put money into a system to be given what they want, even if it's a can of Coke full of sugar and other bad things for you. Right? But that's what citizens want, and that's a metaphor. Some governments do that, right? They expect to just give whatever people want because they are taxpayers. But there's another way of thinking about government which I hope will be the base metaphor for all of our Smart Nation project, which is government can be a platform. Right? It's a much more vague metaphor than the control tower or the vending machine. But government as platform is a clean slate that works with others, that facilitates and convenes and aggregates and brings people together. And that sort of process actually is the kind of new government that we actually need. Right? A government that's willing to do that sort of platform process rather than assume it has all the information or that it has to just give people exactly what they want. So just 3 metaphors to think about, right? And one that I think we really should be the one we move into. Then 2 very, very short comments about the view of a smart nation, and this is really about me speaking as a citizen. I totally agree about there needing to be more role for us being a caring society. And this isn't just about everybody holding hands and singing Kumbaya and feeling good about it, right? But we need that. What are you doing? Maybe you're not on the slides after all. This is constant oscillation here. But what I think is important is we're a tiny nation as well. And this is, I don't say tiny in the sense of, small red dot limited by stuff. But the facts are that we're small, right? There are things that larger spaces can do, which we can't do because we do not have physical space. And that includes some of the allowing for movement of people outside the stressful city area as a kind of a pressure release valve that many large cities are able to do. If you feel disinvested in a smart process, it's a bit easier if you live in New York to just go live in a suburb. Very hard to do that in Singapore, right? I can't tell the people who say, I don't feel very smart. Okay, go and live in Toa Payoh, right? Don't live in the CBD. Please go and live in Pasir Ris or something like that. It doesn't work like that. We need to care so much more for each other because we are going to live in that dense space, and we need to make it a space that is as livable as possible. So the caring is not just a nice to have, it is critical, absolutely critical for our future as a nation. Last thing is really about campaigns, right? And Cheryl, you alluded to this, right? When you said we don't have to feel we need to answer all the questions now. And I'm actually, to be honest, feeling a little bit of angst here, right? It's like, we haven't defined what smart means. What is it that all of us can do? What is the framework? What is the blueprint for government's role and businesses' role and citizens' role? We don't know. We don't know. You don't know.
I know.
It has to, oh well. At least someone knows, right? But most of us don't know. And I think what we need to do is give ourselves permission not just to take part, but permission not to know. It's okay. It's an adaptive process. We will figure it out along the way. The people I showed you on the slide just now did not know what was going to happen. They took a leap of faith. And we can do that too. So I think it's all right not to know.
Okay, thank you. So we've got the final event of the conference, which is the awarding of the prize for the Innovation Lab projects. But first, I'd like you to give a round of applause for an absolutely outstanding panel. Thank you.